So I'm Roberta Finkelstein, and I am a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. But I kind of stopped going to church after high school and didn't come back until 1980 when we were thinking about having a baby. And that was the first time I came to UUCA. And I remember walking in the door and listening to the readings and the hymns and the sermon and thinking, I didn't know that I missed this as much as I did, but boy, is it nice to be back. Barry, you came a little later.
Yeah, so I'm Barry Finkelstein, married to Roberta. And it turns out that I was a born Unitarian Universalist, although not raised as such, because I had never heard of Unitarian Universalism until I met Roberta in 1969. Once Roberta started coming to UUCA, it took about a year of her telling me all about it before I ventured forth. I grew up as a non-religious Jewish boy in Brooklyn, and the idea of going to something called a church was kind of a challenging thing for me. And once I crossed that threshold, the first day that I went, I knew this was perfect. Mm-hmm. I knew that I was really taken by the social justice and the music and the sermon, and it all made perfect sense. Mm-hmm. So, Roberta, you want to tell us what one of the questions that I've been thinking about is how did our lives get transformed through our membership here? I know I have some stories about that. Why don't you share something?
Well, I think of two different things. One is that we were a relatively young couple when we came, and we were definitely mentored into leadership. As a matter of fact, when we had moved away for many years, and when we came back to Northern Virginia this summer, I took a walk through the Memorial Garden, and I felt like I was visiting all the people who of that generation who had recognized something in me and mentored me, and eventually mentored me into ministry. And I just retired after 30 years as a minister.
And what's happened to me is that I have become a Unitarian Universalist stewardship consultant. And of course, I had never heard of stewardship, didn't know anything about it. But early on in our tenure here, I was visited by John Gunning, who was, I believe, on the board at the time, but I'm not sure. But he came to the house and talked to me about the church and about stewardship and about pledging. And I didn't really know John, but we are good friends to this day. We still play in a poker group. And I am now a stewardship consultant. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that happened to me along those lines is that I was very involved when we did the Capitol campaign around 1989, 1990, something like that. And the thing that really impressed me so much about this church was that there was a fair amount of disagreement about whether to spend the kind of money we were spending on this Capitol project or to use this money for something else. And we had a long process of talking it through, and everybody stayed friends. Everybody stayed together. Some people wished we didn't do the campaign. We wished we did something else. But that story stays with me. That's so powerful.
I feel like there's even though this is a large church with a lot of staff and a lot of programs, there's still a commitment to meaningful personal relationships, and that really matters. And that was one of the things. I don't know if I'm going to be able to tell this story, but so when I first came to the church, I was pregnant. We were pregnant, expecting our first baby, and that baby died. And we were very new in the church then. And I had just before this happened, I had agreed to join a women's group, and I had never even gotten to a meeting. And at the memorial service, at Brian's memorial service, all the women from that group came, and they introduced themselves to me, and they told me that they were going to take care of me, and they did. And that's one of the ways that I survived that.
Yeah, and I think that's really that's such a special thing about this church, that it can be super personal, as well as a large, very effective, very efficient church. And the other thing that really mattered to me here was the work on social justice. Roberta mentioned that we were mentored into leadership here, and we were fairly quickly brought on as treasurers, oddly enough, of the Social Responsibilities Committee. And early on, that got us into some very exciting projects. We were involved in a multi-church interfaith program to kind of pressure the county to provide more more beds for homeless people. And we hosted a homeless shelter here at the church.
Rotating.
And we had around 100 volunteers involved in that. It was a huge program. And then we declared ourselves a sanctuary for Central American refugees, which was a big, bold, and really important move. And it got us to working with other churches as well. I remember taking our little baby Danny to a Quaker meeting, and he was the loudest child in the in their Sunday school or equivalent of Sunday school. So,
and I think it's important to mention that Danny came all the way through the religious education program here, and I think it was very valuable for him and for us.
Well, and I became an OWL teacher, also as a result of Danny's experience here with About Your Sexuality, and I still consult with him when I'm going to teach. He's now 40, so I call him up when I'm going to teach an OWL class, and I say, "So, Danny, what are the young people today talking about as far as sex? What issues are on their minds?" And the last time I did that, which was probably 5 or 6 years ago, he said, "Dad, I'm not much more of a young person than you are anymore, so you're kind of on your own here."
That just reminds me of this one little funny story. When Danny graduated from the nursery and went to a religious education class for the first time, he came home the first day and he said he had a great time and the teachers were really nice and he loved it. And the next Sunday we're getting ready to go and he starts to cry and he says he doesn't want to go. You remember this? And I said, "But Danny, you told me you had such a good time last week. Remember you played with Play-Doh?" And he said, "Mom, I ate my whole share of the Play-Doh last week and I don't think they're going to give me any more." And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they did give him more.
Yeah.
More of a lot.
And the other thing that happened with RE here is that I volunteered to teach, but my plan was to teach 1 year older than Danny, so that I learned a little bit about what was in store for the two of us, and that turned out to be really, really super helpful.
Right. Yeah, so we've been away. My ministry work took me away for a long time, and we just came back this past summer. And it's again, as soon as we walked in, I felt like I was home again. It was so nice to be back. And
yeah, for me too. People remembered us and we remembered people. And then I had a chance to play with the house band. I got to play the accordion here, which was a lot of fun. I'd never done that before here at this church. So it's really super special to be back and to be part of this 75th anniversary celebration.
So there's a question here about what the biggest obstacle UUCA has overcome. And I just think, if I think back over the decades that we've been involved since 1980, I see almost a continuous evolution. Like as times changed, as new things became more pressing, it feels like this congregation changed with it. And adapted, and it even though I said I felt at home immediately, it's very different than it was in 1980. Very different, and for the better.
Well, and I think it's the church, the people in the church, the leaders have been able to weather many challenges, ministerial challenges and transitions. The capital campaign project that I mentioned, and how we all came together around that. Then the problems with the building, right? The mold and all that had to be redone, and the church rises to the occasion. Yeah. The other thing I want to talk a little bit about is the sponsoring of Culpeper Garden. This church sponsored the Culpeper Garden as a retirement community for low and moderate income people, and I was very involved there. I was on the board. I was the president for several years, and we then instituted assisted living. And my parents wound up living there. They spent their last 10 years or so of their lives loving Culpeper Garden. And I'm not sure a lot of people know that anymore, because the connection seems a little bit distant now. But that was really special for me.